Good evening, and welcome to the Italian Cultural Institute in Los Angeles. We are truly delighted to host tonight the launch of the Mentoris book series by the Barbera Foundation. Founded by Robert J. Barbera, the Foundation's mission is to encourage and inspire young people to create a stronger future by supporting educational training and initiatives that foster an appreciation of history and culture. In the past, the Barbera Foundation has supported institutions of higher learning such as Thomas Aquinas College, Pepperdine University, and the California State University system. Its focus now is on the Mentoris Project, which creates a library of accessible books that educate and inspire. By telling the story of great Italians and Italian Americans, the Foundation seeks to forge a new generation of American leaders. This event is organized by the Italian Cultural Institute and the Barbera Foundation. I would personally like to thank and acknowledge Robert Barbera for his continued support to the Italian Cultural Institute and to Italian culture and Italian languages in general as well as Natalie Barbera and Ken Lazbinick for their collaboration in organizing this event. And I also like to take a moment to thank my colleague Hilde Callocchia, who has been strategic support to organize this. As a courtesy to others, now please, I invite you to turn off your cell phones. Thank you for your cooperation. I would like to invite you all to our next big event in the Institute on March the 1st, the second edition of the International Design Day. The exhibit will be Delineo Italia Bellissima, will open on March the 1st. One section of the exhibit will highlight works of by regional ceramic and textile artisans, while another section will feature artwork specifically created for the Italian Cultural Institute by internationally renowned artist Valerio Berruti. Please take a moment before you leave to join us as a member if you're not a member yet, and you can apply and ask at the front desk. Now, please, I'd like to thank once again Robert Barbera and the Barbera Foundation for this wonderful initiative and this very wonderful evening. And now, please, let's give a very warm round of applause to Robert Barbera. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is quite a surprise to me. When Ken Lebezic, my mentor, decided on a launch, I thought, well, okay, we'll have about 10 or 20 people, and we'll launch it. And before we knew it, the crowd multiplied and multiplied. The only bad thing about that is we have to provide food for everybody. I do really appreciate you being here. I know what traffic is. It's tough. And you made the extra effort to come here, and that really, I really appreciate that. In this launching and in this series, it has been my intention for years and years to try and do better for what I felt was missing. When I was much younger, I thought history was the thing, and I would learn and study my history books through the years and gather information about history so I would know everything. Then I noticed that over the years, people started talking about heritage and culture. And I said, they're nice words, but I didn't see the depth in understanding what they really meant by heritage and culture. So many people gravitate to Italian food and think they're participating in culture. And somebody says, oh yeah, I'm Italian, and oh, you're Italian, what Italian restaurant do you go to? And I'm looking at it, and quite frankly, nobody cooks like mother, so forget it. So it's very valuable. Most of you people here, I know you, and you're very important. Not only to me, but as people that can help in providing a legacy. I really believe that it is so necessary, it's incumbent on us to keep the process of the heritage going so people know. Even in my own case, my mom, who was absolutely brilliant when it came to finance, was only a 3-year grade school, and so how could she explain to you the finer things and the great literature and the great artists and all of that? So I come from a heritage that had to be acquired over the years. And I find now that even when I talk to people raised in Italy or raised in the United States, they don't know the wonderful people that have made the progress and success possible in our Western civilization. So I felt I had an opportunity, particularly because I met this great guy, Ken Lebesnick, that afforded me the connections in order to get where we are getting. Somebody was asking me tonight, what's your favorite book? Are you kidding? Out of the 50 books, there isn't a favorite, they're all good. And so tonight you'll see a book on Mother Cabrini, who's a fascinating woman. Then there's Cicero, a fascinating guy. Enrique Fermi, Gallo, Giannini, Marconi, Mazet. And this list goes on and on, the contributions that these people made. So this is not the time to go over that. This is really the time to thank the beautiful, beautiful people that have come on as authors to these books. Many of you here tonight, and I have to tell you, I love every one of you. There isn't a book that I don't love. So many books brought me to tears because they're so good. They really know how to get at it. We're writing books on probably the most intellectually intelligent people that traveled on this earth. People that were spiritually motivated to participate in their particular endeavor. It's absolutely beautiful. So, yes, I'm trying to sell the books. It isn't so much, you're laughing at me. It isn't so much selling the books as it is to get to you so that you can see this great stuff. It's something that will warm your heart. It's something that you can pass on. It's exchange and give it. If there's anything that I feel that's important to me, is so that everyone gets to know these great people in these 2,000 years of history that can enlighten them and make them feel happier and significant about their heritage. So I'm really going to pass this on to my mentor, Ken. If you're on the agenda next, is that right? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Robert's such a hard act to follow. I mean, he really is. Thank you, Robert. So my job, I just want to let you know what's happening tonight. I'm going to have a short list of sort of acknowledgments and thank yous to the many, many people who have made this project possible. We're going to watch a very short 1-minute sort of promotional film about the project, and then we're going to get a chance to hear from two of our authors, Dr. Roseanne Welch and Kate Fugeli, reading short passages from their novels. And then we get to go back out at the patio for food and wine and to buy books. So my first thing that I'd like to say is just a thank you to our partners here at the Italian Cultural Institute, Director Valerie Romero, Cultural Attaché Leonino, I'm sorry, I'm going to not get this right, and in particular Nicole Ferrari, who helped make this event possible. Robert Barbera, I think, has single-handedly supported more authors in America over the last 2 years than anyone else. And as managing editor, it's been my great pleasure to assemble the team, and I would even say an army of people that have made this whole project possible. So please bear with me. This is a bit of that sort of Oscar speech of long list of acknowledgments. But there are many, many people, and many are here tonight, who have made this all possible. In Robert's office, I do have to single out one person without whom none of this would have been possible, which is Natalie Barbera. And Natalie worked tirelessly to make this whole project happen. And likewise, in the Barbera office, I want to acknowledge Chris Lorera and Beatrice Lorera. Yes, thank you. The Mentoris books live and are available on a website. I will mention it here, mentorisproject.org. And with us tonight, all the way from Minnesota, is the woman who created that beautiful website, Kathy Childers. And I will say, by the way, at a certain point, we'll say, all right, hold your applause, because there's like a lot of names coming. Alongside, and equally indispensable, is Karen Richardson, who has wears so many hats in this project. She manages the books of the text of the books to ebook form, arranges for all of the online sales mechanisms, and by the way, she's also one of our incredibly talented authors, whose book on Ernest Gallo is among those available tonight. Suzanne Turpin is our brilliant designer, responsible for the look of everything from the book jackets to our beautiful logo. We have great copy editors. Melissa Branzel, who is so terrific, is here tonight, sort of representing the copy editing team. Nicole Gregory is another indispensable editor, but as well, she's the author of the beautiful book on Mother Cabrini. And of course, as you've heard both of us say, the heart of this project is our authors. You'll be hearing from Dr. Roseanne Welch and Kate Fugelei, but there are more than a dozen others here tonight that I want to acknowledge because it's their craft and imagination that bring the heroes of the Mentoris Project to life. I've mentioned Karen Richardson and Nicole Gregory. Also here tonight, Dr. Pam Lamphere, who is writing about the soldier and archaeologist Louis de Cesnola. Peg. Eric Martin, whose book is on Cicero and is available out there. Sheris Mitchell, who's writing on Admiral Giovanni Doria. Colin Mitchell, whose book on Verdi is coming. Jake Rademacher, whose book is on Justice Scalia. Dominic Polera, writing on Vince Lombardi and on Robert Barbera. Peggy O'Reilly, who is writing a book on St. Thomas Aquinas. Adam Parker, whose book on Luca Pacioli introduced me to the fascinating world of double-entry bookkeeping. But seriously, he turns out to be this incredibly fascinating person that, again, in true Robert fashion, I had never heard of before, but Robert knew all about him. So again, it's a great Robert find. Stacia Raymond is writing a beautiful book on Henry Mancini, and her love of the Mancini family and his music is just palpable throughout that book. Pamela Winfrey, who wrote a beautiful book on Marconi, again, available outside for sale tonight. Joel Selbo is here, who's writing about the explorer John Cabot, actually Cabuto, an Italian. Patrick Verone, writing on Scipio Africanus. Valerie Woods, who's writing on the inventor Antonio Mucci. Joe Klein, who wrote on the architect Filippo Brunelleschi. And I want to really point this one out, Peter Myers, whose beautiful book about Leonardo da Vinci is our next launch. That is coming out on April 15th, which is Leonardo's birthday. And Peter's done this fantastic job with a glorious book that I encourage us all to look forward to on April 15th. And now let's have a round of applause for all these great authors. And as I mentioned, we do have a wonderful little promotional film about the project that was put together by a very talented young filmmaker, Xander Eckhouse. And I can't see where the booth is, but why don't we roll the little film right now?
Many, many years ago when I was in high school, taking my history classes, which I thoroughly enjoyed, that I always felt that something was missing. I wanted to know the lives of the people during that period of time. I really wanted to know how they felt, how they lived, and how they coped.
I was asked if I thought I could write a book making this brilliant Nobel Prize-winning physicist understandable to the common man or woman.
I love the Mentoris Project because it brings the lives of these great Italians and Italian Americans to life for the modern reader.
That they become personal, not so factual, but probable as to how and what they were.
He was not only a brilliant scientist, he was an amazing teacher, and I'm hoping that the novel will inspire a whole new generation of scientists.
Putting together this series, we felt that each one of these books, for someone somewhere, is a mentor.
Not only are these books fun to read, they've been real helpers in my own life. They've been inspiring to me personally.
They bring history to life in really interesting ways, and I think they tell important stories for the 21st century.
The Mentoris Project, mentoring a new generation of great Americans.
And so now I want to give you a chance to hear two short excerpts from books of the Mentoris Project. First, it's my great pleasure to welcome an old friend we met several years ago when we were both writing and producing on Touched by an Angel, and we've continued to collaborate in many ways. She has written and edited many books, including, may I put in a promotion for something else, the forthcoming collection of essays on women screenwriters in early Hollywood, When Women Wrote Hollywood, which features profiles written by alums from the program that we are both affiliated with, the Stevens College MFA in TV and Screenwriting, which is well represented here tonight, I know. So please welcome Dr. Roseanne Welch to read from her book, America's Forgotten Founding Father, a novel based on the life of Filippo Mazzei. Roseanne.
I want to dedicate this reading to my grandparents, who were the original immigrants from Italy, from Madeira, Sicily, in 1909 and 1925, respectively, and my mother, who is their youngest child, who's sitting there tonight next to my son, their great-grandson, who's named after Giuseppe Italiano. And this is from America's Forgotten Founding Father. He is the man who lived next door to Thomas Jefferson and wrote the words, "All men are created equal," for the first time on this land. And he's only recently been credited with that by our very Congress. So, the friendship that was to last a lifetime began as Virginia planter Thomas Adams' carriage rode up the grand driveway of Monticello. Filippo saw at a glance how much Jefferson esteemed all things Italian. The neoclassical design of the main home came from the principles described by Italian Renaissance architect Andrea Palladio. "How do you know that?" Adams asked Filippo as they drove. "I have read Palladio's 4 books of architecture, both as a student, and later when I moved to London, I used the English version to help me learn the language. Among all the architects in Europe, Palladio is considered the most influential individual in the history of architecture. His precepts are unforgettable." Filippo felt the pride of his homeland as he took in the grandeur of the 4 columns and the center rotunda of Monticello. "To see my culture echoed in this new land." "It means you belong here, my friend," said Adams. More than the echo of Italian architecture, Filippo felt at home the moment the 32-year-old Jefferson stepped out the front portico, all 6 feet 2 inches of him. Jefferson greeted them in Italian, though he mispronounced ciao, saying it phonetically, "ciao." For an instant, Filippo did not know how to respond. To correct his host seemed disrespectful, but to allow him to continue uncorrected could cause embarrassment later. Jefferson clearly saw the confusion on Filippo's face and switched to English. "You must excuse my pronunciation, sir," began Jefferson. "Having only read the language up until now, I have never heard the words spoken aloud. I hope I have caused no offense." "Oh, no offense taken," promised Filippo immediately in English. "The great Jefferson has made a mistake?" laughed Adams heartily. "I knew Filippo would be an asset to the colonies." Filippo switched to Italian to say, "Ciao e grazie mille," pronouncing each word slowly so that Jefferson could take note, which he certainly did. "Thank you for offering such generous hospitality in such an elegant home." Jefferson basked in the compliment to his pride and joy. "I have often said that Italy is a field where the inhabitants of our southern states may see much to copy in our own agriculture," Jefferson said, again trying to exercise his Italian. Adams laughed heartily. "Would anyone care to translate, or shall I retire to my room and allow you two to continue the lessons?" "We shall all retire," Jefferson said, "after our guest has done me one more favor." "Anything," said Filippo. "May you please allow me to hear the name of my home pronounced by a native?" Jefferson asked. "Of course," said Filippo, as he stood on the portico himself, admiring the view of the main gardens and the mountains beyond. Then he said Monticello, phonetically. Monticello, little mount. "Ah," Jefferson noted, "your CE is pronounced ch. I shall remember that. Italian is such a delightful language, but I fear learning it has confounded my French and my Spanish." Then Filippo watched warmly as Jefferson himself looked out over his land and said for the first time, Monticello. As it had been such a long trip, the men all retired to their rooms, with Jefferson extracting a promise that Filippo would rise early and join him on his morning rounds. So before breakfast, the two men set out on foot across leaf-strewn paths to see what Jefferson had built. Filippo said quietly, not wanting to disturb the peace, "Que bella vista." "That's why I wanted to own this land, not merely inherit my father's next door," said Jefferson. "My father forewent tobacco a few years ago for wheat. He's influenced by Washington, who fancies himself a great farmer, though I'm convinced he's a better surveyor." "But I thought tobacco was the darling crop of Europe," said Filippo. "The problem is tobacco can wear out your soil if you're not careful about its cultivation. And at this time in our relations to our mother country," Jefferson said, "wheat exports do not require the same financial entanglements with English merchants, so many of my neighbors have moved away from tobacco." "But if my eyes do not deceive me, you have not made this move," said Filippo. "Some English merchants have begun to sell tobacco at a price too low to suit the planters in Virginia. They hope to break our ability to, dare I say it, foment rebellion. But my connections still pay me well." "Perhaps the merchants were told what I was told, that New England is the center of this rebellion," said Filippo. "Ha! That's what John and Sam Adams want you to think," said Jefferson. "They may have a corner on the rhetoric, but we have the funds to support such an adventure." Filippo could tell Jefferson was feeling him out to see which side Filippo would take, since he had recently been living in England. "I believe in freedom," Filippo stated clearly. "I have seen too much of those in power dictating how those in poorer circumstances must live." "Then we're in agreement," said Jefferson. As Filippo shook hands, he noted with irony the small wooden cabins that dotted the edges of the field, enough to house the individual enslaved families that Filippo saw already at work. Filippo knew he would have to resolve his thoughts about this enslaved labor if he was going to succeed in this new community. So he was happy to see that Jefferson also employed some paid labor and some indentured servants. Filippo hoped that his own use of those paid forms of labor exclusively might prove an example for his new friend. But this was not yet the time to broach such a deep subject. As they walked, Jefferson talked at length about his serious study of the Italian language. Around 1764, he had purchased an Italian-English dictionary and 3 more historical works in Italian: Dante's Divine Comedy, the complete works of Niccolò Machiavelli, and that copy of Andrea Palladio's 4 books of architecture, all in the original Italian. He flipped through his journal and pulled out a quote that he liked. "We must contrive a building in such a manner that the finest and most noble parts be the most exposed to public view, and the less agreeable removed from sight as much as possible." "Why the interest in a country that you have yet to see?" Filippo asked. "I could ask you the same, my friend," observed Jefferson. "For me, Roman taste, genius, magnificent, it excites ideas in me, and I know I will see Italy someday." As Jefferson's linguistic skills grew, he had begun to fill the pages of his commonplace book with extracts from well-loved classical poems. He and Filippo debated their favorite poets. For Filippo, it was Virgil. For Jefferson at this time, it was Aeschylus. Jefferson's favorite was one that Filippo wasn't sure about. He wanted to brag about Virgil and the storm. "In Virgil, I feel the power of the sea," agreed Jefferson. "But with Aeschylus, I feel the power of the heart." Then Jefferson recited in a much quieter voice, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." "Granted, that gives me shivers," said Filippo. "But for such a young man with so much to look forward to, it seems a sad poem on which to settle." Jefferson pondered that thought silently as they crossed over into the land owned by Edward Carter, a poor neighbor of Jefferson's, who was hoping to sell his 400-acre farm and move inland where he could afford to accommodate his 12 children. "You have brought me here for a reason other than to debate the merits of our favorite poets," said Filippo. "Perhaps," said Jefferson. "I love this land, and I intend to live out my life here. But without society, men are never contented. Buy this land, live near me, and we can build a society to our taste. The young James Madison, who I hear you've already met, will inherit the land next door from his father a few years from now." "But I've yet to see the land that Mr. Adams has offered to sell me in Augusta County," said Filippo. "Our soil is much more fertile for wine than anywhere in the country," said Jefferson. "How do you know?" asked Filippo, "since no one has yet tried to cultivate wine in any of your colonies?" Jefferson admitted that no one could know for sure which soil would be best, but most wine drinkers, and therefore most customers, are here in my section of Virginia. Besides, I'm deeply interested in the agricultural prospects of this state. If you live beside me, I may watch you cultivate wine and the almonds and the olives and the other Mediterranean plants you've brought from a front row seat. More and more amazed at how two men born in countries so far from each other, into such seemingly different families and cultures, could share so much in common, that Filippo swayed closer to Jefferson's plan. When finally the Virginian threw in a large number of his own acres to add to Filippo's holdings, he couldn't help but agree. Neighbors they would be for life.
So great. Thank you, Roseanne. That was beautiful. And as you see, the Mentoris books, by and large, are novels that bring these human beings to life in wonderful ways. Well, our next reader is a brilliant actress whose award-winning one-woman show, Rachel Kaloff, has toured America. She's also a wonderful writer who has written about growing up in Nebraska and about having a son in the 75th Ranger Regiment, which is actually our son, as you know. Full disclosure, Kate Fugale is my wife, and she's written a superb book for the Mentoris Project, Fermi's Gifts. Please welcome Kate.
I always like people to know, I think everybody likes to know how long things are going to be. So I have a little introduction that's 2 minutes and 3 seconds, and then I'll read for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. I guess that's my OCD coming out. I don't know. But anyway, there are many people who talk about doing hopeful things and who desire to create optimism and inspire the next generation. There are very few who take action. Robert Barbera is one of those who takes action. His dream of creating a series of books that would highlight the lives of those who inspired us, moved us, changed the world is becoming a reality. I'm really proud to be part of this hopeful and inspiring vision. Thank you, Robert, for not only dreaming, but for doing. Thank you also to Ken Lezebnik, who's put together a team of writers and who's encouraged us and inspired us with your commitment. I have tremendous respect for both of you. It's often said that a performer needs to fall in love on some level with the character they're playing. I feel the same is true for a writer. I was intimidated at first by the prospect of writing about the Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Enrico Fermi. I soon fell in love with him. Most people know about his Nobel Prize and his work on the Manhattan Project. They don't know about his immense stamina, his sense of humor, his ability to make complicated things understandable, his fierce love of the out of doors, and the love and respect he commanded by all who worked with him and studied with him, and his utter lack of pretension. When you spend months and months studying a person, I believe they become part of your soul. The passage I'd like to read takes place when Fermi was about 25 years old, in about 1925, and on a summer vacation in the Dolomites. He was on the verge of being a tenured professor of physics at the University of Rome, a phenomenon, something that had never happened to someone so young. Dr. Castelnuovo, a professor of mathematics, had invited Fermi to come and stay with him and his boisterous family for a vacation. The Capon family was also there, and their daughter Laura was falling in love with Fermi. But Fermi had no interest in sitting around and talking to Professor Castelnuovo. He and his friend Rossetti led groups of young people, among them Gina Castelnuovo and Laura Capon, on endless hikes in which they fired questions at them, a sort of vigorous classroom. Classic Fermi. "Can't we slow down even for a moment?" whispered Gina Castelnuovo, daughter of the mathematician Guido Castelnuovo, to her friend Laura Capon. "Enrico won't allow it," Laura answered. "Look at him, leaping from rock to rock, showing off. But you can't blame him. He is incredibly strong and fast." "He's not that fast." "You just have a crush on him," said Gina. "A hike in the Dolomites requires effort, ladies, and stamina," Fermi shouted. "I heard everything you just said, by the way. The wind is carrying the sound waves in my direction. You gave me your body masses, and I measured the distance and height of the mountain. The pace we are keeping should be perfect, given your potential. That is, unless one of you lied about how much you weigh." He ducked behind a rock to avoid the shower of sticks and pebbles that came his way following his last remark. "When Rossetti comes," Fermi promised, "he will be very unhappy about your throwing potential specimens at me. I'm not deterred by your warlike natures, ladies, but I do offer to gallantly carry your backpacks as well as mine. However, that will make you lighter, and thus," he pulled out his slide rule, a pencil, and a piece of paper, and made some quick calculations. "You should be able to walk much faster." As they gave their packs to Fermi, Gina said, "And here I stood up for you with my father, saying you'd take good care of us on this hike. Why, we even found a place for you to stay the whole summer so you could relax before beginning your job at the University of Rome. And you're going to repay my poor father by exhausting his daughter? I can see the headlines now. Beautiful 18-year-old daughter of esteemed mathematics professor turned into a wreck by whippersnapper professor of theoretical physics. All from one hike. Perhaps if we had Tyrolean jackets and knickerbockers like our teacher Enrico Fermi, we'd be able to go faster," Laura suggested, giggling. "I've been admiring them. I made them myself, you know," Fermi said. "Why buy something at a store when you can make it on a machine all by yourself?" "Is that why the back end is sagging?" "Is it the material or something else?" said Laura, feigning innocence. "Either you need a tailor or a diet." Fermi ignored the teasing, put up his thick thumb to measure the height of the sun, and declared, "In precisely 7 minutes, it will be noon. If we stop wasting oxygen by chattering, we can stop for lunch. Anyone who has misled me on her weight will receive a half ration." More sticks and pebbles flew through the air. "Do you never get out of breath, ever?" Laura asked. "Not once that I can ever remember," Fermi answered. "I seem to remember a time 2 years ago when you were entirely out of breath," said Laura. "It was on the first day we met. You tripped on your shoelace and went sprawling during a soccer game. Or have you forgotten?" asked Laura. Fermi's face suddenly became very earnest. "I haven't forgotten a single moment of that day," he said, looking deeply into her blue-green eyes. Laura smiled, understanding his meaning. A blush came to her cheeks. "But that didn't count as out of breath," he said, recovering himself. "A large object, namely the earth, pressed against my chest. That was an entirely different matter, and therefore not at all admissible as out of breath. You say you're majoring in science at the University of Rome? A sophomore should know better. We're terrified that we'll have you as a teacher, said Gina, elbowing her friend. You shouldn't be, said Fermi confidently. I pride myself on being able to teach anyone anything, no matter how doltish or slow. This prompted a third rain of sticks and pebbles. All at once, the hikers came to the crest of the mountain and gave a collective gasp. Below, a vast green mountain meadow spread out like an emerald carpet.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you all again for being here tonight. And now, of course, we get a chance to enjoy, thanks to Robert's generosity again, some wine and some food. And please take advantage of buying some books. Natalie is set up, ready for business. I just want to thank, again, everyone for being here, and especially, of course, our host, Barbera, and the Italian Cultural Institute, and the director, and all the staff here has been so great. It's wonderful to be here, and I feel like the Mentoris Project is now officially launched. Thank you so much.